Hey guys, this is Doug with fellowshipofthemartyrs.com. I am coming to you again from Liberty, Missouri. And, ooh, collar funny there. Okay, there we go. And wanted to talk to you a little bit about a comment since it was public comment on one of my videos, I don't think I have to ask for permission to comment on it publicly since it was a public comment. And it brought up a good point and something we haven't really talked about, and so I went to working on a response, and then I thought, you know what, that's a really good question that a lot of people think about. So rather than try and squeeze an answer into 500 characters or whatever on the YouTube comment, why don't I just make a video and respond that way? So in my video about the pre-wrath rapture, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, whatever. I didn't really talk about the amillennialist or the preterist position, but those are available options as well. Or the pan-trib position, which is that it's all just going to pan out, so why worry? Which is probably the best one to actually hold. Anyway, the user Casterson13 just typed this comment here just a few hours ago while I was out running around town. Well, I doubt the tribulation is close, because the Holy Temple is not built yet, and it will be hard to get the Muslims to give up their mosque that is built right on top of the holy site of the temple. When you see the abomination of desolation, then run for the hills and mountains. Okay, very typical, very reasonable point to discuss. Now, there's several things there. One is that if you go to templeinstitute.org, I believe it is, I don't have time to look it up right this minute, maybe .com, but templeinstitute.org, you will see the group of Jews who have been actively raising money and getting things ready for the temple to be rebuilt. In fact, the temple has been prefabricated. The stones are already cut, and they just need to be moved onto the Temple Mount. The Levites have been trained. They have ceremonial robes ready to go. They have the incense of the Lord. They found the seeds from the incense of the Lord that they thought was extinct, which I believe was where Ron Wyatt said it was, under Golgotha with the Ark of the Covenant. They are training Levites, priests, on how to carry the Ark without getting killed. Why would you do that if you didn't think you had the Ark or could get the Ark when it was time? They're training them on how to sacrifice animals, and in fact, the last Intifada happened way back in 2003 or whatever, when the general it just blanked out of my head. Anyway, he picked up one of the stones with a bulldozer and plopped it down right near the temple, and letting the Arabs know, the Muslims know, we're ready to rebuild this anytime now. And that's what started the last Intifada, when they were bombing buses and suicide bombers and everything else. Okay, the Temple Mount is a big rectangle. Okay, let me use a graphic illustration here if I have something. Okay, well, that's not right. Okay, here we go. Sorry, avalanche in my desk. Okay. The Temple Mount is a rectangle. It's not quite as long as this, but let's just say the Temple Mount is this kind of shape. Okay. I'm getting a pen here. Okay, now, on the Temple Mount, the Hebrew temple was basically placed here, give or take. Okay, just rough draft, okay? Now, the Dome of the Rock is over here, okay? Now, the main temple was here, and then the wings of the temple, and then this was all the outer court, or the Gentile court. And it talks about how the outer court will be given to the Gentiles. Well, it is. The Dome of the Rock is over here. We believe we know the spot where the Holy of Holies was, and it's not under the Dome of the Rock. It's not even inside. It's you know, you could put a basic temple, okay, not all the wings and not maybe as big and grandiose as Solomon's temple, but closer to Herod's temple. And certainly, all you really need is the Holy of Holies for the ark, and then the inside of the temple where the sacrifices and the showbread and the candelabra and everything sits. There is no problem whatsoever putting some kind of temple back on the Temple Mount without disturbing the Dome of the Rock. That's my understanding. People are welcome to argue with me, but it doesn't have to be the giant whiz bang that Solomon's temple or whatever was. Knife fell off the thingy, came at me. Anyway, okay. So for one thing, none of the verses in Luke 21, Mark 13, Matthew 24, Daniel chapter 9, none of them actually say that a temple is required. Okay? Originally, there wasn't a temple. There was a tabernacle. There was a tent out in the wilderness. Down near Beersheba is where it started. There's actually a place where you can go and you can find a 3-foot tall stone wall in a circle with little walls going out from it different directions, kind of like a sunburst. And that was where they originally camped, and each of the tribes had their little section, and the wall in the middle was the area of the Levites, and nobody was to go in there. Okay? And that's where the tent, the tabernacle that Moses had built when they were out in the wilderness was. And the Levites were in charge of packing it all up and carrying it to the next location, setting it all up, putting the Holy of Holies, putting the ark in the Holy of Holies, doing the sacrifices, handling everything. The big altars had rings on them, and they'd put big sticks through them and carry them just like they had in Egypt with other things, whatever. So what it says is that the abomination that causes desolation is standing where it ought not to be, in the holy place. Okay, well, the holy place could be in a tent down in Beersheba. If we were going to restore the sacrifices, it might make sense to restore the sacrifices back to the place where the sacrifices started. So one argument that I've heard is that you could build a tabernacle according to the specifications in Leviticus and Exodus that met the specifications and plant it back where the very first time that the tabernacle showed up and offer sacrifices there. It doesn't have to be on the Temple Mount. Okay? It wasn't until the time of David that the ark came into Jerusalem, when they captured Jerusalem from the Canaanites, and it wasn't until Solomon that there was a temple at all. He just set up the tabernacle. David just set up the tabernacle there in Jerusalem. So about every year, some crazy rabbi tries to rappel out of a helicopter onto the Temple Mount and slit a sheep's neck real quick and start the sacrifices again. Okay, so the assumption is we can't be in the tribulation because the temple's not there. Okay, first of all, you're assuming a temple that Scripture doesn't specifically say. Okay, that's dangerous. That's eisegesis. That's when we read into it what we want instead of letting the text speak for itself. All it says is that there's sacrifices going on, and that there's some place where the abomination that causes desolation is standing where he ought not to be, that he's in the holy place. That doesn't necessarily mean the most holy place. I mean, the argument is that this is a reference to Antiochus Epiphanes during the time of the Maccabees riding a pig into the Holy of Holies and sacrificing a pig and covering it in pig blood and defiling the temple. And so we expect something like that because this is a reference to that. But God can be just as angry as that without it requiring a building. It can mean something else. Now, on the personal spiral, when the Antichrist defiles this temple, you should run for the hills, and you should, whatever, you should know that your end is near, or whatever. So, but as far as Daniel and Mark and Matthew and the abomination that causes desolation, first of all, there's no indication that the temple has to be there before the tribulation starts. That is another assumption, that for the temple, for the sacrifices to cease in the middle of the tribulation, the temple has to be there from the beginning of the tribulation. So since the temple's not there, then the rapture's not close because there's a pre-trib rapture and whatever. Well, that's not required. The temple could be built in a matter of just a very few months because it's all been prefabricated. Everything is in place. The Levites are trained. There's not to be the sound of any tool in the temple. So they have to be quarried someplace else and shaped and fitted, and all they got to do then is pick them up and plop them down. And that's already been done. Okay? They've gathered the gold for the ceremonial headdress and the giant candelabra. You can see all that on templeinstitute.org. The other thing is, this idea that the tribulation can't start until the temple is there because it'll take a long time to build the temple is wrong. And the idea that somehow sacrifices need to be going on through the first 3.5 years so that they're stopped in the middle. Again, that's us reading into the text. All it says that he will cause the sacrifices to cease. The sacrifices might only have been done 1 or 2 times. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not necessary to have years or months or even weeks of sacrifices ahead of that point. You might just you could put the tabernacle on the Temple Mount. Okay? You could just pop up a pup tent. It doesn't even have to be according to Mosaic specs or anything. You could just put a little a lean-to or a Quonset hut or anything on the Temple Mount and start the sacrifices, and then PETA or human rights organizations are upset about you killing the little sheep and the blood and the biohazard and who knows what, and a week later it stops. That's enough. That's enough for prophecy to be fulfilled. Okay? There are times when we look at a prophetic word and we think we know what he means by that and how he's going to interpret that and apply that. Okay, on the personal level, God says, I'm going to take care of you as I care for the sparrows and whatever. Now, this is on my heart right now because of the situation here financially. I just had to stop the video because somebody just came in, totally unexpected source, handed me $500. Praise God, really need it. Water bill supposed to be cut off today, not getting cut off till tomorrow, but and I'm just trusting the Lord. As long as I get down there at like 9 o'clock in the morning, we'll have the money to pay that off. I'm sorry, I'm going to move this. It might be on the microphone there. Trust in the Lord. Sure enough, money shows up. That's just what came today is enough to pay the water bills that were due today but won't get cut off till tomorrow morning. Between the mail, and then I'm like, okay, that's some of it. Where's the rest? And then bam, somebody walks in, hands me $500. Totally unexpected. Didn't hear that it was coming from that source. Don't recall ever getting money from that source before. Just, God told me to give you half my tax return. Cool, thanks. Okay, anyway, he said that he would provide, but that doesn't mean a big screen TV and a fancy car and whatever. That means food and clothing. He didn't say that you would never be in debt. He didn't say that, he just said you wouldn't have to beg for bread. So there's times when we want the promise that the Lord gave us to be manifested in some much bigger way than is absolutely necessary for him to be true. Now, sometimes he manifests it in a way that's beyond anything we can think or imagine. But it's not necessary for him to be true. Okay? And so I always encourage people to dial their expectations down and then be pleasantly surprised, instead of having their expectations really high and then being mad at God because he was true but not the way you thought he would be. Okay? Do you understand? So technically, all that has to happen for the abomination of desolation to happen is that sacrifices start and then they're ceased. Could be a day, could be one time. As long as it's more than one time that the sacrifices were going on and they're forced to stop, that prophecy's true. Now, and then when you see the Antichrist in the most holy place, or in a place where he ought not to be, then run for the hills. And you know that the end is near. And from that point, you count 1,260 days. Okay, well, that means that you have to define what that place is. Now, it could be the Holy of Holies on the Temple Mount, but nobody's allowed to walk there now. There's a spot where the rabbis, you're not allowed. There's a viewing thing way back here, but they don't let even the Jews walk around on that piece of the Temple Mount. Now, there's the Dome of the Rock with a wall. And then there's this just open area, and nobody's allowed to walk around on there because you might be walking on the Holy of Holies. Okay, really, right now, if whoever's the Antichrist, Obama or Raj, what's his name, or, Prince whoever of England, or whoever people think the Antichrist is, something it's me, by the way. Anyway, so just for humor, let's say I am the Antichrist. All that would have to happen is for me to stand in the holy place as it sits right now to qualify for that. Okay, the rabbis would lose it. I mean, lose it. If Obama or somebody just walked out onto the Temple Mount and stood where they think the Holy of Holies is, they would lose it. Why? Because to them that is the most holy place. Never mind, there's no walls in a building and no whatever. Okay, so at the bare minimum, all that's required is one sacrifice that's then stopped, and for somebody to stand in the holy place if we know what the holy place is. Now, if you set a tabernacle up out in Beersheba in the desert, and somebody walks into the Holy of Holies where the ark is, that would do it. Okay, so this idea that we can't be in the tribulation because the Dome of the Rock is still standing, I think is a mistaken understanding. If you will research a little bit, even just go look at a Google Maps, look at Jerusalem from overhead, you will see that the Dome of the Rock is way off to one side. And there is space in all of the models that you've seen of the temple. It sits right down the middle, and it's a long, skinny thing. Well, there's room, they believe, based on the arguments about how big the cubit was and stuff like that. But there's room for the Dome of the Rock to still be standing and for the temple to be alongside of it, and still have part of the court for the Gentiles. Okay, so that's my primary answer to that question. Now, the original comment was, I doubt the tribulation is close because the Holy Temple is not built yet, and it will be hard to get the Muslims to give up their mosque that is built right on top of the holy site of the temple. Okay, first of all, it's not built right on top. It's off to one side. For another thing, the tribulation, the temple is not required to have been built for the tribulation to start. There is no prophecy that says at the beginning of the 3.5 years, the temple will be in place and sacrifices will be going on. All it says that at the midpoint, something will happen and cause the sacrifices to cease, and the Antichrist, or the abomination that causes desolation, will be in the holy place where he's not supposed to be. That's it. Okay, you could just move the timeline one day ahead of that, put everything in place, and the prophecy's true. Okay? There's all kinds of people, and I grew up Baptist under the assumption that the temple was going to be there for some period of time, that we would know that the temple was built, that the sacrifices would be going on, and all of this stuff. And I don't think the sacrifices mean what they did. I don't expect to see a pillar of fire over a rebuilt temple. Just like for much of the time when the temple was there, God did not inhabit it. It was a cesspool. For a while, it was the town dump, and everybody threw all their junk in Jerusalem into the temple and packed it full. Josiah came and cleaned it all out. Anyway, so I don't expect to see a pillar of fire over the temple, and I don't think the sacrifices mean what they did, but it is a time clock that the Lord is using here somehow. If he's not talking metaphorically, if he's even talking about lambs and rams and bulls and that kind of sacrifice, and he's not talking about the sacrifice of our heart and the defilement of our own temples in something sort of metaphysical and spiritual, if he actually means a physical most holy place, a physical temple, and physical sacrifices for the prophecy to be true, all that has to happen is that 10 minutes before that, sacrifices were going on and there was a most holy place. It doesn't require a 3.5-year lead up to the beginning of the tribulation. Okay? If one of them rabbis actually manages to rappel out of a helicopter onto the Holy of Holies and slit a lamb's throat, and the Secretary General of the UN shows up, stands in the Holy of Holies and makes it stop, maybe that qualifies. Anyway, I just want you to see, I know that I'm arguing to absurdity, but I want you to show that the bare minimum is all that's necessary for God to be true and for the prophecy to be true. In Jesus' time, they thought he's going to be a king, he's going to rule the world, he's going to have all this fanfare. They didn't have in their mind at all that he was going to be born in a manger, that he was going to be humble, that he was going to be, and even though it says, I'll be whipped, I'll be pierced, they encircle me, there's no indication scripturally he's going to be some mighty king that takes over the world. And yet that's what they wanted to see. So they couldn't see when he did come because they have this bigger expectation of what God means rather than the bare minimum. Born in a manger, persecuted, hated, lived in Galilee, all of this stuff. So he met the qualifications. He was born in Bethlehem, but he didn't spend hardly any time there. And then he was in Egypt, then he was in Nazareth, so he didn't claim Bethlehem, even though he technically met the qualifications of the prophecy. They expected like a lifelong Bethlehem resident, and that wasn't necessary. All that had to happen was that he popped out in Bethlehem. So anyway, that's something to think about. I don't want to make this too long. I want to encourage you, as the Lord gives you a word, as you're looking at the Bible and trying to interpret the book of Revelation, there's only one Revelation. Anyway, as you're looking at the book of Revelation, or as you're trying to interpret personal revelations, which may be plural, because if you have more than one, always assume the lowest possible spiral. Always assume the most humble possible thing. Born in a manger, persecuted, died on a cross, not King of Kings, Lord of Lords, going to rule the world, whatever, in a carnal way. This kind of goes back to my video about the two witnesses. The kid called me. He's 15, 16 years old, something like that. Says God told him he was one of the two witnesses. I said, okay, do you know who the other one is? He says, well, my friend Bobby. Okay, you and your friend Bobby are the two witnesses, huh? Well, that's what I think God is telling me. Okay, let's ask God what you and Bobby are the two witnesses to. And I'll pray with you, and you just listen real good and see what God tells you. So he prays and says, God says me and Bobby are the two witnesses to our middle school. Okay, great. God bless you to go be the two witnesses to your middle school. I got no problem with that. Another brother and I heard we were the two witnesses. Lord, well, yeah, you're the two witnesses to liberty. Oh, okay, fine. He makes teams. He sends them out, Paul and Barnabas, whatever. Fine. Okay, I'm going to assume the lowest possible thing. Now, if he wants to elevate Mikey and Bobby to be the two witnesses that, okay, here's another one. It says people think they're going to stand in Jerusalem and prophesy for 3.5 years. It doesn't say that. It says Babylon, where Jesus was crucified. And so we take, okay, well, we know Jesus was crucified in Jerusalem, and that sounds like it's very specific. So he must not have meant Babylon. So we're going to say that they're going to stand in front of the Wailing Wall, and fire's going to come out of their mouth for 3.5 years. And like they're not going to sleep or eat or poop or anything. They're just going to stand in front of the Wailing Wall. Okay, why are they standing in front of the Wailing Wall? Why aren't they up on the Temple Mount in front of the rebuilt temple? And why? What do we do with the thing that says Babylon? He doesn't call Jerusalem Babylon anywhere else that I can find. So, and it doesn't say Jerusalem. It says Babylon, where Christ was crucified. Maybe he doesn't mean Jerusalem. Maybe he means something else. I think Revelation 18, where it talks about the fall of Babylon, doesn't fit Jerusalem at all. It's surrounded by many waters. The merchants all stand afar away. I don't think that fits Jerusalem at all. I think it fits the United States of America. Well, if the United States is Babylon, it doesn't fit Iraq either. If the United States is Babylon, who crucified Christ more throughout history than the United States? Who had a bigger opportunity to make a humongous difference and instead has crucified him over and over and over by our greed and our prosperity gospel and all the other stuff more than the United States? It's entirely possible that those two witnesses prophesy in Babylon for 3.5 years, where Christ has been crucified more than any other place. Okay? See? It doesn't, you can't just pitch the Babylon and say Jerusalem because that's where Christ was crucified. You got to blend it all together and figure out, wow, he may not mean the geological, physical place that we think. Another one, it says that Babylon is a city on 7 hills. People think that that's Rome, and that the Pope is the Antichrist, and that Rome is Babylon. Okay, well then is Rome where Christ has been crucified more than any other place? Well, maybe. Okay, I give you. Okay, so maybe the two witnesses prophesy in Rome for 3.5 years. Okay, but Jerusalem is a city on 7 hills as far as I can tell. Liberty, Missouri is a city on 7 hills. Well, everything Satan has, God has a counterpart to. Everything Satan has is a cheap knockoff of something God has. Okay, it shocked me. I'm like, for real? Liberty's a city on 7 hills. Yeah. What do I do with that? I mean, what's the point of that? This little humble little town, and hills are, I mean, like little, not like San Francisco. We got like little mounds, but there's 7 of them that the city's built on. There's 7 Hills Road is just south of town. I looked at maps. Sure enough, we're a city on 7 hills. Well, what do I do with that? And I'm like, Lord, I don't understand. What's this about a city on 7 hills? I don't think that Rome qualifies as the Babylon in Revelation 18 as much as the United States does. He says, if you were looking down from my perspective, would you notice the hill that Jerusalem's on, or the hills that Rome is on, or the Rocky Mountains? What is a hill? What is little if you're God? I'm like, wow. He says, get out a map and count. Okay, so I get out a topographical map of the United States. And there's 5 major mountain ranges: the Rockies, the Sierra Madres, the Cascades, the Catskills, and the Appalachian. Okay. Then I'm like, oh, in like 1950, we got Hawaii, which is the largest mountain chain in the world. The tallest mountain in the world is Mauna Kea, which is a volcanic mountain, which is bigger than Mount Everest. It's just that it's mostly underwater. And then we added Alaska and the Alaskan mountain chain. So there's 7 hills. America is a city on 7 hills. If you're looking at mountain ranges, okay, as hills instead of little teeny lumps that you can't even see from space. Wow. So after 1948, when Jerusalem became a nation, the United States annexed, became states. Hawaii and Alaska became states, and the United States became a city on 7 hills. Wow. Okay, not sure what to do with that. Okay, so I'm just trying to show you there's all kinds of different ways of looking at this stuff. And what you've been fed is the Tim LaHaye Left Behind. This is the standard pastoral Baptist way of looking at this thing. And I think it's right to go back to the text and say, Lord, does it really honestly say that we need pews and stained glass? Where's the candles? Where's the robes? Where's the temple that's built before the tribulation starts? Is any of that really in there? What is the bare minimum that I need to be looking to that would meet the qualifications? Okay? That's just prophecy interpretation 101. It may not move as fast as you think. It may not look as big as you think, but you will miss it in some cases if you're not paying attention to what the text actually says and not what you think that it says. So, in love, that's my answer. I'm not picking on the YouTube user that commented at all. It's the standard church understanding, and it's what I grew up with and what was explained to me, the impression that I got from the Left Behind books and everything else, and I don't believe it's biblical at all. There's no biblical place that I can find anywhere that says the temple has to be there more than a few minutes before, or even that the temple itself has to be there. It could be like I said, a tent or maybe no covering at all. All we need is sacrifices that are stopped and somebody to stand in the holy place that causes that is the abomination that causes desolation. So anyway, chew on that and see what comes out. Thanks for listening. Lots more at fellowshipofthemartyrs.com. If you want to support the ministry and what we're doing here, there's a how to help button at the top of our website where you can get mailing address and phone numbers. And if you want to PayPal or email, you could PayPal to FOTM at fellowshipofthemartyrs.com. That's FOTM at fellowshipofthemartyrs.com if you'd like to email us directly or PayPal. So anyway, thanks for listening. God bless you. If you're coming through Kansas City, you're welcome as the Lord leads to come give us a hug and see what we're doing and pray together, and we'll do whatever we can for you. And when the day comes that everything hits the fan, I extend my invitation again. If the Lord will let you get here, we believe this will be a place of refuge, and we will do everything we can to stand with you and walk this out together as best we can. So God bless you. And may the Lord lead us all into the fullness of His truth in the name of Jesus.